One day, I received a phone call from my mother, who still lives in the house where I grew up. She mentioned that a wedding invitation had arrived for me. When I asked for the name of the sender that my mother had read aloud, I thought, I guess it did arrive after all. I didn't intend to give my home address to the sender. Moreover, if they had normal sensibilities, they wouldn't send me a wedding invitation. Still, upon receiving the invitation, I thought to myself, the sender must be in quite a desperate situation. The one I even felt sorry for was the sender's pride. The bride was my ex-girlfriend, whom I dated during my first year of university. When I whispered the name Rose after a long time, memories of when I broke up with her came flooding back into my mind. I think it's better for us to break up. You don't seem to have much potential for the future. The day I met Rose after 10 days, she suddenly brought up the topic of breaking up. Having been feeling down after losing my father a week ago, when I received a message from Rose saying, I want to meet, I thought it would be something comforting. However, what Rose told me was a goodbye. Moreover, the reason for the breakup was that I lacked future prospects, according to her. I was so surprised that I lost my voice. After that, Rose tried to explain various things, but my mind couldn't process any of the words she was saying. As if she had said everything she wanted to, Rose left with a relieved expression. I stood there in a daze, unable to say anything in response, and watched Rose leave. The relationship with the first girlfriend I had ever had in my life came to an end like this, surprisingly quietly. A few days after parting ways with Rose, I was invited for a meal by Jeff, the first friend I made when I entered college, and we were close enough to talk about anything openly. Still struggling to fully recover from the sadness of losing my father and the disappointment of being rejected by Rose, I initially declined Jeff's invitation. However, Jeff insisted, saying, That's something I really need to tell you. Thinking there might be something behind Jeff's attitude, I wasn't too enthusiastic, but I decided to go along with the meal. The meeting place was a diner near the university that Jeff and I often visit. As I opened the glass door, I saw that Jeff had already arrived. Beside him was Jeff's girlfriend, Beth. Looking at Beth's face, I felt a bit embarrassed. It was because Beth was the one who introduced me to Rose. Why is Beth here? Is today's conversation somehow related to her? With that thought in mind, I took a seat across the table from the two of them. Long time no see. How have you been? I offered a conventional greeting, but Beth's expression remained tense. Her expression seemed even more meaningful and significant. While we chatted about trivial matters with Jeff until our ordered meals arrived, suddenly Beth brought up a topic. I'm sorry. I was taken aback by her sudden apology. Since her apology was rather loud, the customers around us turned their attention towards us. Jeff offered a friendly smile to the surroundings with a sorry gesture, attempting to smooth over the situation. Ignoring such matters, Beth continued with her story. I asked Jeff to contact Bob on my behalf. With that, Beth began to explain the reason she was present at the gathering. After hearing Beth's explanation, I thought to myself, I'm glad Emma initiated the breakup. It was because I learned about Rose's side of the story for the first time. According to Beth, she introduced me to Rose because Rose had repeatedly asked her to mediate and connect us. Rose was saying that she was worthy of being Harry's girlfriend. According to Beth, Rose started saying that to Beth right after the first time Rose and I met. The trigger for this was when Jeff, Beth, Rose, and I went on a double date together. At first, Beth was unsure whether to comply with Rose's request or not. It was because Rose's true intention of wanting to be introduced to me was painfully obvious. Indeed, Rose's intentions were exactly as Beth had suspected. I want an easy and comfortable life in the future, so introduce me to Harry. Rose told this directly to Beth. At that time, my father was the president of a real estate company. I have no recollection of it, but when I shared my life story with Rose, I probably mentioned my father as well. However, I didn't speak boastfully about anything. At that time, my father was pushing himself hard and going through the process of liquidating the company despite his own health issues. The company run by my father had been struggling with declining sales since I entered high school due to intensifying competition. I didn't hear about this directly from my father. However, I noticed that my father had been wearing a more serious expression compared to before, so I had a vague sense that the business was going through tough times. Moreover, the strain from previous difficulties seemed to have taken its toll. During the summer of my third year in high school, my father was diagnosed with cancer. Furthermore, his condition had worsened to the point where there was no prospect of a complete recovery even after surgery. Perhaps realizing that his life might not be long, my father was moving forward with discussions about integrating the company with another firm to protect the livelihoods of the employees. Of course, I wouldn't have told Rose about something like that. However, Rose might have formed the equation in her mind that company president equals wealthy family. Beth and Rose have known each other since high school. Beth grew tired of Rose's personality and had considered ending their friendship multiple times. However, due to Beth's gentle nature, she couldn't bring herself to cut ties with the assertive Rose. When Rose asked her to introduce me as well, Beth, feeling guilty about it, gave in to Rose's persistence once again. Seeing me getting into a relationship with Rose and witnessing how happily I talked about her, Beth apparently felt a pang in her heart. When Rose learned about my father's passing, she apparently nonchalantly told Beth, "I'm going to break up with Harry." Upon hearing Rose's demeanor at that moment, Beth felt even more guilty about what she had done to me. So, basically, I'm being discarded, huh? As I thought about it, a sense of anger towards Rose surged within me. At the same time, my father's catchphrase came back to me, and then I made a decision. To convey that decision to my mother, the next day, I returned to my hometown and went back to my parents' house. After hearing my thoughts, my mother said, "I understand. Do what you want to do." The following day, I went through the process of withdrawing from the university. It was 6 years later that I received a wedding invitation from Rose. I received the invitation because when Beth contacted me saying, "Rose is getting married. If you're invited, will you attend?" I replied, "I will attend." I heard from Beth that Rose's fiancé is the heir of an air conditioning equipment company, one of the top companies in the local area. The wedding guests are expected to be numerous. Rose must have thought that she needed to gather a similar number of friends as the groom's side participants to maintain a good appearance. However, due to Rose's personality, it was challenging for her to approach people and find enough friends to invite. Sending out invitations and receiving many regrets would leave a negative impression on the groom and his parents. Therefore, it seems that Rose set the condition to send invitations only to those who would definitely respond with attendance. I had heard from Beth that Rose was desperately trying to match the number of attendees for the wedding. So, I marked the attendance option on the wedding invitation I received and added the words, "I will be delighted to attend." And then the day of the wedding arrived. When I arrived at the venue and was talking with Jeff and Beth, I heard a voice from behind. When I turned around, there was Rose standing there. Perhaps due to my biased perspective, her cheerful expression seemed somewhat malicious. No, Rose hadn't changed at all from the Rose I knew before. She was someone who judged the value of things based on money. "I'm sorry, even though you probably don't have the money," she said to me. I didn't say anything in response. Jeff seemed like he was about to say something, but I stopped him with a look. Just at that moment, the groom's parents were passing by us. Then the groom's father stopped and looked at me with a surprised expression on his face. He said, "Are you Harry?" It was lucky that he approached me before the ceremony started. I attended this wedding with the intention of showing this moment to Rose. "It's been a while," I greeted him. Rose had a clear expression of, "What's going on?" on her face. In fact, my parents and the groom's father have been close friends since elementary school. I also met him a few times when I was younger. Moreover, my mother and the groom's father still occasionally kept in touch, so the groom's father knew about my situation. "By the way, how's university going? Are you doing well?" the groom's father asked me. "Yes, thanks to my father's support. I'm managing somehow," I answered. "I thought you dropped out of university and were doing nothing," Rose muttered involuntarily. I had asked Beth to tell Rose that I had quit university and become an NEET, not in education, employment, or training. In reality, I had quit university to reapply for a different one. I aimed for the medical faculty of an Ivy League university. I decided to reapply because my father had hoped for me to study medicine there. In fact, my father himself had wished to study medicine at the university. However, because he needed to take over the family business, my father had to give up on the idea of studying medicine. It seemed that my father had entrusted me with the dream of studying medicine that he couldn't fulfill himself. I studied with that intention, but my academic performance didn't improve as I had hoped. When I moved on to my second year of high school, I ultimately decided to give up on pursuing medical school. When I told my father about this, he simply said, "I understand." However, I couldn't shake the feeling of his inexplicably lonely expression during that time. My father's catchphrase was, "Challenges are worthwhile when facing high walls. Don't run away." Perhaps my father wanted to convey that message to me. With that thought in mind, I continued my university life while carrying a lingering sense of unease. When my father passed away, I realized once again that what I truly wanted was to study medicine. When I thought of being rejected by Rose and felt like I was being discarded, my father's catchphrase, "Don't run away," came to my mind. I consulted with my mother to obtain permission to withdraw from university. Because I was anxious about burdening her with the tuition fees, my mother reassured me, saying, "You don't need to worry about the tuition fees," and gave me a push of encouragement. Then she looked at my father's portrait and said, "Your father used to say, 'I believe that he will rise up again,' and he entrusted me with some money for this moment. He wanted you to use it." After hearing my mother's words, I studied diligently and managed to pass the medical school entrance exam. Now I'm in my 5th year on the path to becoming a doctor, so to speak. "Well then, when you become a doctor, we'll rely on you," the groom's father said, extending his hand to me. I shook his hand back with a smile. Seeing that, Rose also smiled, but her expression seemed forced. The wedding proceeded in a peaceful atmosphere from start to finish. As I looked at the happy expressions of the bride and groom, I couldn't help but think, if Rose hadn't broken up with me, had Rose not ended our relationship, perhaps I wouldn't have pursued becoming a doctor. Maybe I should feel a bit grateful after all.